The sea remembers names. If you listen close between waves, you can hear them. Captains and cowards, oaths and last breaths, braided into the wind like tangled rigging. Mine is woven there now, too, because of a compass that pointed at a dream and a treasure that sang back. They say every pirate tale begins in a tavern, and ours did, though I swear the bluefin smelled more of wet maps than rum that night. The storm drums had been pounding Nassau all afternoon, and the rafters leaked salt water in neat lines, as if the sky were taking notes. I was too, taking notes, scribbling weather marks and strange overheard talk for our captain, Mara Vane. Mara Vane could hypnotize a room without spilling a word. She leaned in the corner like a drawn blade that had chosen to rest. No plumage, no lace, no theatrical hat, just a long salt coat, a scar like a dash along her jaw, and eyes that tracked exits the way a cat tracks birds. If anyone could wrestle fortune by the throat and make it apologize, it was Mara. And what she wanted that night was the legend that wouldn't sit still, the Starfall Compass. The story of the Starfall Compass was older than any map, but newer than most lies. It was said to point not north, but toward the one thing you wanted most, provided you set it upon an open sea and were honest enough with yourself to know your desire. Most died at that last part, but Mara knew what she wanted. The vault of the Ashen hour, a place the ocean only remembers at a single moment each month, when tide and moon hold their breath together. Our ship, the Nightingale's Lark, the Lark to the crew, sat in the harbor impatient as a hound, lines humming, hull aching for wake. She was a two-masted brig, fast as gossip and twice as dangerous, her planks patched with woods from a dozen ports, like a quilt of previous sins. I loved her the way some men loved cathedrals. I'd served as navigator, and when no one was looking, storyteller, because sometimes a crew needs a tale to hold them together better than rope. Mara's hand closed around my shoulder like a firm promise. She said, "We move at midnight. There's a man here with news," her head tilted toward a shabby musician on a barrel, coaxing a tune from a concertina. "He's been playing the same shanty 6 nights now, too careful, like someone hiding a map in music." I tuned my ear to the melody and found it crooked, like a shoreline drawn drunk. The refrain twisted back on itself every fourth measure, and the coda landed exactly where an honest tune would not. The room's chatter dulled as I traced the pattern on the table with condensation. It wasn't a song, it was bearings. The musician saw me seeing him and smiled like a man deciding to leap from a higher ledge than planned. When he finished, the musician slipped out like smoke, and we followed, me and Mara and Tamsin the gunner, whose laughter could nap stone. In the alley, he waited by a rain barrel, fingers worrying the concertina bellows. He said, "Captain Vane," and the honor in his voice was a tilted thing, part respect, part calculation. "I've got a song that wants to be an island." Transactions with pirates are like fencing. Both parties must step toward inevitability with grace. Barlow claimed to know the hiding place of the Starfall Compass. Locked in the shrine aboard a ghost ship, the waking morrow, last seen west of Crooked Bank, under a sky that didn't agree with itself. He wanted passage, a cut, and a promise that his enemies would outlive his usefulness. Mara promised 2 of those things. She didn't say which. We slipped from Nassau at midnight, sails spilling moon milk. Tanzan's cannons coughed polite thunder as if to clear their throats. The crew, Tanzan, quick with fire, old Tomas at the helm, Soot the cook, who never forgave onions, and Silas Crow, our quartermaster, who could count your fingers and sell 3 of them back to you, moved quiet. Above us, clouds gossiped with the moon, and the air tasted like it was saving a secret. By dawn, the sea unrolled a list of its moods, petulant, curious, forgiving. Barlow's bearings set us threading the reefs of Crooked Bank, where coral stacks rose like the teeth of a god that had laughed too hard. The water there ran clear as a kept promise. Beneath us, a city of fish kept festival, oblivious to the skeletons of ships that decorated the shallows like cautionary jewelry. We sighted the waking morrow at sundown. Not a ship so much as a memory of one, her hull fretted by fire and time, her figurehead cracked into a grimace. She drifted as if tethered to an invisible post that belonged not to the sea, but to a story. Lanterns burned in her windows without smoke. "Ghosts," Tanzan muttered, half hopeful, half ready. "If they bleed, I can introduce myself." We boarded at twilight, the rope creaking like a warning we were too brave to hear. Inside, the waking morrow felt wrong in an ordinary way, like an empty room that should have remembered a laugh but did not. We found the shrine in the captain's quarters, a simple box of ironwood banded with brass, vined over by barnacles that had no right to be alive above water. The lid wore an engraving of a falling star. Silas leaned in with a chisel. Mara stayed his hand with a look. She said, "Gently, some doors only open if you mean them kindly." Barlow sang low, the same crooked melody from the tavern, and the barnacles twitched like ears. The brass bands warmed. When the lid yielded, it did so with a sigh like a relieved chest. Inside lay the starfall compass, a disk of brass and dark glass, its needle cut thin as a lie. The moment Mara touched it, it spun and stopped, not north, but dead west, pointing at a patch of ocean that looked the same as the rest, except for how it suddenly mattered. Something else lay in the box, a page of vellum, brittle as an old promise. On it was precise a tide table that didn't belong to any coast. It listed hours when the door admits breath, and marks of a moon I didn't recognize, as if the drafter had been counting with a sky that took no orders from ours. The vault of the Ashen hour, if this page was honest, had entrances the ocean opened only when the world blinked. We had 3 nights to reach it. On the sail back to our deck, I felt the waking morrow shudder underfoot, not from wave or wind, but from a movement of attention. From the lower deck, a figure rose, translucent where it should have been shadow, hunched in the posture of a man too long folded into rage. "Jack Rook," Barlow breathed, as if naming a ghost gave it the politeness of a seat. Rook had been the morrow's captain, famed for bottling storms and provoking gods. He looked at Mara, at the compass in her hand, and at me, like the sea might read through me as a page. He pointed to the western horizon with a finger of fog and mouthed a warning, "Not alone." Then he melted away like spilled moonlight. Back aboard the Lark, we set course as the compass commanded. "Not alone," Tanzan scoffed as she primed a swivel gun. "We're never alone. The sea collects ships like a landlord collects rent.
but I watched Silas, the quartermaster, watch us. There is a way a man stares at treasure that doesn't include you. It's like seeing a knife in a smile.
The first night ran smooth as oil. The second turned rowdy. We crossed the stretch sailors called the Sighing Shelf, where the ocean breathes through caverns beneath in a rhythm that makes your own lungs feel borrowed. Wind fell away, and our sails hung like emptied pockets. Then the water lifted without waves, like something waking underneath us. Old Thomas spat overboard and whispered the names of saints he didn't believe in. Barlow gripped the rail and started humming. Mara cocked her head, listening to the ocean like it was trying to tell a joke too dark to enjoy. Lightning stretched the horizon. A shape heaved itself from the darkness, a black-sailed cutter, lean as hunger, closing fast from our port quarter. Her pennant showed a silver thorn. "Thorn," Mara said, "not quite a curse, not quite a prayer. Captain Vesper Thorn, scourge of the Abacos, who kept no crew longer than she could keep their terror sharpened. If we had the compass, she wanted it, and she was the sort to take your hands to simplify custody. Run or rake, Tamsin asked, hands on the long nine. Both, Mara said, and smiled like a storm choosing a direction. We ran, threading the lark through water that forgot to be sane. The cutter gained. At Mara's signal we luffed hard, sails snapping, and our broadside kissed the night with flame. The first volley from Tamsin's guns walked along the bow of the cutter like fireflies that hadn't learned their manners. Wood and men screamed. But Thorn was a dancer. She cut across our stern, grapnels flew, and the distance between us folded like a map. The sea smelled of powder and unkind choices. Boarders came, we met them at the rail, steel arguing with steel. I'm not a poet about blood, it has a job. But I remember the strangest things. How the deck planks felt warm under my boots. How a man's ring cut my knuckles. How Tamsin laughed as if joy were ammunition. Mara fought like thought, fast, precise, without wasted motion. She found Thorn in the melee, and they circled, the kind of duel where each step writes a line of a letter you hope never gets mailed. Then Silas Crow chose his moment and chose wrong. He slipped behind Mara with a belaying pin raised like an ugly blessing. I shouted, and Barlow jammed the bellows of his concertina into Silas's gut. The note that exploded out of it would have startled birds from another country. Mara turned, broke Silas's wrist with her pummel, and ended the duel with Thorn in the same motion, disarming her and sending her over the rail to the kinder court of the sea. The cutter, leaderless, sheered off, dragging its wounded pride and bleeding wake into the dark. We bound Silas to the mainmast. He spat petitions and bargains. "It's not you I betrayed, it's your myth. All captains become parables. Better to sink one before it learns to swim." Mara stared at him as if he were speaking a language from a ruined city. "You'll live," she said, "long enough to meet who you tried to become." That frightened him more than a pistol would have. By dawn of the third day, the moon hauled itself pale and thin above a western cloud bank. The compass's needle trembled, then steadied. I checked the vellum tide table and felt my breath hitch. "Now," I said, "in 1 hour the door admits breath." Ahead the sea looked ordinary as bread, but the sea never looks like what it is. Mara set the sails low to half, like kneeling. We drifted to the coordinates like people arriving at a confession. At the exact minute the page declared, the ocean failed to remember itself and parted. Not theatrically, not like scripture, but like a curtain made of forgetting. Water thinned and sank, revealing a slope of black stone printed with barnacles like ancient punctuation. The lark slid forward into a bowl where air felt newly minted. In the center, a door rose from the water, basalt with a hinge of hammered aurum that looked warm, though the world was cool. I heard the tiniest ticking,
as if the sea had a watch in its pocket.
We anchored by feel and faith. The door bore no handle, just that falling star sigil again, and beneath it 7 small recesses the size of fingertips. Mara pressed her hand to the stone. It hummed under her palm, tasting her. "Truth," she murmured, "it wants truth, and in 7 breaths." Barlow stepped forward, voice low. "It's the Ashen hour. You must tell it 7 things you truly are, not 7 things you wish to be." Mara nodded and spoke. "I am captain of the Nightingale's Lark." She pressed one recess, the stone warmed. "I am the last of the Vane bloodline." The second glowed faintly. "I am a liar when I need to be." The third glowed brighter, oddly approving. "I am afraid of forgiveness." The fourth thrummed under our feet like a swallowed thunder. "I am a thief of time." The fifth teased the air with the scent of rain. "I am kinder to the dead than the living." The sixth tasted like iron in the mouth. She hesitated on the 7th, eyes flicking to Silas tied at the rail. "I am not alone." The final recess flared golden, and the door unstitched itself along seams only the sea had known. Inside lay a stair of basalt leading into the island beneath the ocean. We descended with lanterns and the courage people invent when they cannot find the real thing quickly enough. The walls glittered with salt and traces of mica, as if the rock had been seasoning itself for guests. We came to a hall whose floor was a map carved into stone, not of coasts, but of currents, and at its heart a pedestal with a glass bowl half full of black sand that moved like a thinking thing. The bowl's rim bore a single inscription: "When the sea holds its breath, the world forgets the hour. Steal it." This was the vault of the Ashen hour, not a place to keep coins, but a place to keep time that didn't tick. The black sand was ash of meteors that never reached the earth, so the ancients believed. In truth, it felt magnetic, emotional, as if stories had been burned into it. Barlow lifted a pinch between careful fingers. It tugged back like a tame storm. This is what the compass pointed at, not metal or jewels, but saved minutes. There were jewels, too, because myths respect marketing. Lacquered chests along the walls, coins minted by empires that only dreamed of drowning, pearls the size of a gambler's wish. But the room's gravity belonged to that bowl. We stood in a quiet that wasn't silence so much as a held chord. "Take what we can carry, leave what would sink us," Mara said, practical even in wonder. Tamsin stuffed pearls into a pouch with a reverence that would have amused her on any other day. The world loves balance, and the sea is the world's sternest accountant. Somewhere above, something shifted. A low groan threaded the rock like an unwelcome melody. The bowl's sand quickened, spiraling. The compass needle jittered as if trying to find a pulse. "We've stayed too long," I said, feeling the truth of it in my knees. "The Ashen hour is closing." We turned to leave, but Silas Crow had not come as far down as the rest of us. He had slipped his bonds like a man who'd made a profession of wriggling out of stories. At the mouth of the hall, he held a pistol to Barlow's ribs. "This is where parables end," he said softly, "with somebody clever and somebody slower to it." Mara's hand drifted to her saber. Silas gestured with the pistol. "No, but we will trade. The compass for Barlow. I intend to sell direction at a premium."
Mara did not argue with men who had already finished writing their own letters of introduction to hell. She placed the compass on the floor, rolled it toward him with the toe of her boot, then met his eyes with a gaze as honest as the door had required. "You were right about one thing," she said. "I am becoming a parable, and you're about to be the warning in it." Tamsin moved like a fuse lit low. 2 steps, a thrown lantern, a bloom of startled light. Silas flinched. Barlow twisted. The pistol barked loud enough to make the rock swallow its name. The shot took the glass bowl. Black sand erupted into a spiral, a small indoor galaxy, whirling against gravity with a will I wouldn't have believed if I weren't breathing it. The room dimmed to a dusk that didn't belong to any hour we knew. In that rushed false twilight, I saw figures where there were none, echoes of ourselves in other choices, stepping wrong or reaching further. Time lost its friction. The lark groaned above like a calling name. "Out!" Mara barked, voice cutting through the syrup of the moment. We ran. Stairs lengthened and shortened under our feet, as if they were trying on different ages. I felt years catch my ankles and fall away. At one landing, the ghost of Captain Jack Rook stood blocking the path, his face both furious and pleading. He looked at the compass in Silas's hand, and then at Mara, and inclined his head the tiniest degree toward her. It was an apology he had owed the sea and never paid. Mara returned the nod, and the ghost stepped aside, like mist that has remembered it is mist. We erupted into the tide bowl as the door began to reseal, stone knitting with a sound like 1,000 knives resheathed. The sea outside the bowl stacked itself taller, ready to fall. We hauled aboard the Lark, lines flying, hands burning. "Cut the cable," old Thomas hollered, "or the sea will take the anchor and us with it." Tamsin's axe sang. The anchor line snapped with a sound that had opinions. The Lark lurched. Water leaned in, not a wave, but a decision. Silas stumbled onto deck, compass clutched, eyes wide as honesty finally catching him. He swung the pistol toward Mara, then toward the sky, then toward his own uncertainty. "You can't captain a story," he said to no one in particular. "It always sails itself in the end." He turned to run. Barlow, still bleeding but upright, grabbed his sleeve and held like an oath. "Stay," he said, and there was more ancient power in that single syllable than in any gun. Silas wrenched free and leapt for the rail. The sea met him with the professional indifference it reserves for everyone. Then the sea came down, not in a crush, but as a glove slipping back onto a hand. The bowl filled, we rose, then dropped, the hull complaining magnificently. Sails cracked, masts groaned, my teeth counted themselves. But the Lark was an animal trained to survive worse than new truths. It clawed its way out of the depression as it disappeared, then rode the reformed wave like a queen, grudgingly returning to her throne. When the water remembered how to be ordinary, we were already alive upon it. Silas did not surface. Barlow sagged to the deck, breathing in measures. Mara knelt, pressed 2 fingers to his neck, and nodded at the pulse like it was an ally late to dinner. We took stock. Chests of coin enough to buy forgiveness in 4 languages, pearls to sow a new sky, and a sack of black sand gathered by accident when the bowl burst, glowing like a sleeping ember. The compass lay cracked where Silas had dropped it, its needle leisurely, almost contentedly spinning in small circles, as if finally free of the pressure of our wanting. We set a course not for a port, but for a horizon, the one where it is understood that stories go when they want to catch their breath. For weeks we sailed the long blue sentence of the world, repairing timbers, binding wounds, and learning new silences. The black sand we kept in a glass bottle wrapped in sailcloth. Sometimes, when the ship's bell marked the hour, the bottle would hum in sympathy, and our spells of sleep felt longer, as if the sand had given back minutes we had misplaced. "It wants to be returned," Barlow said one night, watching moonlight oil the water. "Or used." "We used it to not die," Tamsin said, with a grin that meant trouble. "We used it to not die." Mara listened, fingers resting on the cracked compass as if comforting a friend who'd finally stopped being useful. "Everything wants to be more than it is," she said, "including us. But the world has opinions about that. News travels on the sea the way fire travels on paper, quick and brighter than it should be. By the time we angled for Tortuga to lay in stores, rumors of the vault had outrun us, that we had stolen a tide itself, that we commanded a pet kraken made of clocks, that Mara Vane had married the moon. I dispensed with the wilder versions when buying limes and rope, but I kept the one about the marriage, because even lies deserve one good dance before they go home. We didn't stay. Too many knives behind too many smiles. We headed south by west into regions of the map where cartographers had chosen dragons or left hopeful blankness. The weather turned crystalline and then rude, the sort of gust that laughs at your plans and then buys you a drink. One evening, the horizon smeared and a wall of rain advanced like a marching decision. "Reef everything," Mara ordered. "Let the sky have its tantrum, we'll keep our manners." The storm was a library of thunder. Each crack wrote a new book on the spine of the night. We hove to, nose in, letting the lark rise and fall with the logic of a bigger animal beneath us. Lightning showed us the faces we carry when we think no one is watching. Faces of fear and resolve and small private prayers. A bolt took the foremast topgallant, sculpted it into a question, and then moved on. I wondered if the vault had offended the weather by daring to keep a little of its temper in a bowl. Near dawn, the rain gentled to needles. In that hard grey light, a shape rolled on the starboard beam. A bottle, green glass, sealed with wax. Tamsin fished it aboard with a boat-hook. Inside lay a page tight as a secret. The script was clean and intimate. I uncorked it and read, "To Mara Vane, who has stolen ours and left me with my own. Meet me where the sea writes in chalk. V.T." I didn't need to read the initials twice. Vesper Thorn was alive and literate. "Where the sea writes in chalk," Mara mused. "White cliffs, a tide flat." Barlow tapped the map near a chain of islands where the waves rubbed limestone into powder that hung in air like the sigh of old teeth. "Here," he said, "the chalk keys." I felt the world lean toward us, eager to hear the next part. We reached the keys at twilight, the cliffs pale as abandoned letters. Thorn's cutter lay at anchor in a bay shaped like a bitten coin. She stood on the beach, cloak snapping, alive in the way of people who have nearly stopped being that twice. No weapon in her hands, which meant she had many near enough. Mara stepped ashore with me and Tamsin in loose orbit. Two queens of impolite choices, facing.
"I came to give something back," Thorn said, and my list of surprises reordered itself. "You threw me to a generous ocean. It returned me with opinions. The compass pointed at your ship until it broke in my hands, and then it pointed nowhere. That seemed fair." She drew from her cloak not the compass, ours lay cracked aboard, but a shard of black glass wrapped in cloth, a piece of your hour. She tossed it to Mara, who caught it without blinking. "And why," Mara asked, "would you do that?" Thorn smiled with more sadness than teeth. "Because I would take the vault if I knew how to keep the minutes afterward. I never learned to keep anything." They stood there, two versions of a story that might have preferred to be told once. "What do you want, Vesper?" Mara asked. "A promise to stop haunting each other, a promise to pick different prey, a promise to settle a debt I owe to the wave that did not keep me." Mara looked at the shard in her hand, and then past Thorn at the sea writing in chalky foam. "Then let the sea witness," she said. "We'll haunt different coasts. If we meet again, it will be because the wind is in a mood, not because we hired it to be." They clasped wrists like people who had accidentally become their best enemies. We parted. We sailed. The shard joined the bottle of black sand, and for days our shadows seemed longer even at noon, as if the shard remembered a midnight it wanted to hold up against every hour. The crew settled into the kind of calm that only follows almost dying. Soft jokes, careful repairs, small kindnesses passed back and forth like contraband. Soot, the cook, invented a stew that would have been a crime in 4 nations. We ate it and admired its audacity. I began to notice other changes. The starfall compass, even cracked, still wanted to be of use. Its needle, though lazy, occasionally twitched at strange moments, when a gull cried in a way that made me think of home, when Tamsin smiled without malice, when Mara stood alone at the prow and let herself be small. "It points," I said to her once, "at whatever we're honest about wanting." She smiled, a private thing, and tucked the compass into her coat like a kept secret. One evening, under a dome of stars generous enough to embarrass a saint, we spilled the black sand onto a canvas and used a bit of stolen hour as if it were salt. We traced our future routes with it, scattering fines along the lines to season the journey, as Barlow said with a grin. The sand moved minutely, aligning with currents on our map, as if consulting an older, better chart. We laughed childlike. In the morning, our sails found winds they liked, as if we'd rung a bell only wind could hear. We made ourselves busy with honest piracy, which is to say, the redistribution of poorly appreciated wealth. We took a fat merchant who declared himself a philosophy of prosperity and set him down lighter and better educated. We escorted a pilgrim sloop through a reef thicket in exchange for songs that made Barlow cry without apology. We gave half our Tortuga haul to a widow whose only crime had been loving a man with bad timing. "Thieves," Silas had sneered once, and he was right. But I like to think we stole, too, from the stories that expected us to be only monsters. And then, one noon that tasted suspiciously like beginning again, the cracked compass woke with purpose. Its needle pointed not toward a treasure or a trap, but toward a sound. We followed, hearts curious as crows. The sea deepened to a blue that felt like thinking. From the water rose singing, not human, not wail, but like a choir arranged by gravity. We hove to and listened. The black sand bottle hummed in harmony. The shard in Mara's pocket warmed like a consenting ember. "It's the vault," I breathed, "far below us."
Barlow lifted his concertina. He played the crooked song that had brought us here, gentler now, as if apologizing to the parts of the world that chose not to be found. The sea listened. The needle settled like a bird landing. We poured a pinch of the black sand over the rail. It fell in a thin ribbon, reluctant to say goodbye, then consented. The singing shifted key, resolved, and in that moment I fancied the world and all the hours in it forgave our theft the way a grandparent forgives a child's mischief for the sake of the laughter it produced. Not all stories need a crown, but some ask for a crest. Ours came as a great whale surfaced near the bow, immense and gentle, its eye a patient coin. It exhaled, and its breath smelled of kelp and libraries. It regarded us, then dove, trailing a ribbon of phosphorescence like a signature. We cheered because we were alive and because the world had chosen to answer us with a creature instead of a storm. We set our prow toward land not because treasure had run out, but because stories sometimes wish to touch a dock so they can see how far they've drifted. Port Royal was quieter than Nassau, and its taverns smelled more of promises than proofs. When we strode in with salt in our hair and black sand under our nails, the room stilled the way rooms do when they haven't yet decided whether to applaud or run. We bought drinks with coins that had inflated with legend on the walk from ship to door. I told the tale you are hearing now, maybe with fewer adjectives and more sweat. And the bluefin's cousin, the green gannet, shouted in all the right places. Mara stood apart, listening with that cat's patience, tasting the air for changes. A child no older than a promise tugged at her sleeve, eyes wide enough to sail. "Are you a pirate?" she asked. Mara crouched, scar gentle in the light. "Some days. Most days I'm just a person who doesn't like being told where the horizon is." The child considered that, then nodded as if promoted. "Me too." We left with new charts and an old thirst. On deck, under a sky that had rehearsed its stars just for us, we raised a cup to all we had won and all we had learned to leave behind. I looked at the cracked compass one last time that night and asked it nothing. It spun lazily and settled on Mara, then on the loch, then on the horizon. It hadn't stopped working, it had simply changed the question. So this is what I know. The sea remembers names, but it also remembers songs. We left a song in a bowl under the ocean and took a chorus with us, and that chorus now lives in the wood of our ship and the bones of our wrists. When storms rise, we hum it, and the wind listens. When we anchor, we hum it, and the seabed forgives us our hooks. When the world is loud, we hum it until our hour returns, the small piece of time you keep bright in your pocket for emergencies. One day, because every story wants a door left ajar, we'll hear the singing again and know the vault is calling the rest of its breath home. We will go, and we will give back more than we took. And if the sea demands a price we cannot pay, we will offer our names, which it already owns, and ask only that it pronounce them with the accent of those who love the horizon more than they feared falling off the edge of the world. Until then, we sail. We steal from men who love numbers more than people. We throw rope to ships that forgot where their courage was stowed. We drink to Silas, not because he deserves it, but because we do, and because remembering is a kind of seamanship. We listen for Thorn's cutter in the dark and hope it is headed somewhere we are not, carrying a woman who learned to hold a minute without crushing it.
If you ever find a bottle singing on the tide that doesn't match any moon, open it and pour a grain of black sand into your palm. It may hum to the shape of your own wanting. Be honest with it. It will point you, not north, but true. And if you hear a voice whispering between waves, telling of a compass that was a question, and a vault that was a breath, that's me, or someone like me, reading the water to see who I might yet become. If you sailed with me this far, you already know the truth,
Adventure isn't in maps or in gold. It's in how your heart tips the deck when it chooses. If you want more voyages, more nights where the sky forgets how to be quiet, more tales of storms that learned our names, then climb aboard for the next story. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like to keep our lanterns burning, and share this voyage with someone who needs the horizon today. Fair winds, and I'll see you on the next tide.